Over 1 million frequent flyer miles, enough to circle the globe 40 times over. Trips to Europe, Asia, Africa, the Caribbean. First-class upgrades, lifetime elite status with a major airline. The total cost? $3,140 and 12,150 cups of chocolate pudding. This isn't fiction. This isn't fraud. This is the story of David Phillips, a civil engineer from California who in May of 1999 discovered a loophole so perfect, so beautifully simple, that it would make him internationally famous, inspire a critically acclaimed film, and earn him a nickname he'd carry for the rest of his life, the Pudding Guy. But here's what makes this story worth telling. David didn't hack anything. He didn't steal. He didn't even bend the rules. He simply read them more carefully than the corporations who wrote them. And in doing so, he pulled off what might be the most elegant exploitation of corporate America's promotional machinery ever documented. Let's find out exactly how he did it. David Phillips wasn't your typical bargain hunter. By 1999, he was working as a civil engineer at UC Davis in California, a job that required precision, attention to detail, and an almost obsessive focus on numbers. He had a wife, Cindy, and 2 young daughters, a normal, middle-class American family. But David had a hobby that set him apart from his suburban neighbors. He was deeply, almost religiously, into frequent flyer programs. Now, before your eyes glaze over, understand that in the late 90s, frequent flyer miles weren't just about getting a free flight once every few years. For people like David, they were a parallel currency, a game with rules that most people never bothered to learn. He'd already taught himself to count cards in blackjack, though he hated the cigarette smoke in casinos enough to give it up. The frequent flyer world offered him the same intellectual challenge without the secondhand smoke and with the added bonus of actual travel. David wasn't collecting miles because he was wealthy. He was collecting them because he loved the puzzle. How many ways could you earn miles without actually flying? Which credit cards offered the best sign-up bonuses? Which hotel chains gave you the most points per dollar? He'd spend hours on Flyer Talk, an online forum where travel hackers shared tips and tricks. He already had a comfortable stash of miles before May 1999. But what happened that month would change everything. To understand why David's pudding scheme was even possible, we need to talk about the world he was operating in. The late 1990s were the golden age of frequent flyer programs. Airlines were handing out miles like candy, partnering with everyone from credit card companies to rental car agencies to, yes, food manufacturers. The thinking was simple: get people hooked on collecting miles and they'll become loyal customers. But here's the thing. Most of these partnerships were structured hastily, with promotional terms written by people who assumed customers would behave predictably. Buy groceries, collect a few miles, maybe earn a free flight after a year or two. Nobody at these companies was gaming out what would happen if someone approached their promotion not as a casual shopper, but as a mathematician looking for inefficiencies. And there was another factor in play. The spring of 1999 was peak Y2K paranoia. Remember Y2K? The millennium bug? The widespread fear that computer systems around the world would crash when the year rolled over from 1999 to 2000 because older systems couldn't handle 4-digit years? People were legitimately worried about societal collapse. Grocery stores were seeing runs on canned goods, batteries, water. Preppers were building bunkers. The idea of someone stockpiling thousands of pudding cups didn't seem crazy in that context. It seemed almost responsible. So here's David Phillips in May 1999, doing what he always did, reading promotional materials carefully. Healthy Choice, the frozen food brand owned by Conagra, was running a promotion. Buy Healthy Choice products, mail in the UPC barcodes, get frequent flyer miles. Standard stuff. The offer was 500 miles for every 10 barcodes you submitted. And if you got your submissions postmarked by May 31st, you'd get double, 1,000 miles per 10 barcodes. David saw the promotion and did what any miles enthusiast would do. He did the math. Healthy Choice frozen dinners were selling for about $2 each. For $20 worth of frozen meals, you'd get 1,000 miles. Miles were generally valued at about 2 cents each, so 1,000 miles was worth roughly $20 in travel value. Break even, maybe a little better if you actually wanted to eat the frozen dinners. Not particularly exciting. But David kept looking. He found that Healthy Choice also made canned soups, and these were on sale at some stores for 90 cents each. Better. $9 for 1,000 miles. That's 9/10 of a cent per mile. Now we're talking. That's actually a good deal. But then David walked into a grocery outlet, a discount grocery chain in California, and that's where he found it. Individual serving cups of Healthy Choice chocolate pudding, 25 cents each. Let's pause here for a moment, because this is where David's engineering brain kicked into high gear. He pulled out a calculator, or maybe he didn't even need one. 25 cents per pudding cup. 10 cups for the promotion equals $2.50. With the May 31st deadline, that's 1,000 miles for $2.50, a quarter of a cent per mile. For context, David's personal threshold for a good deal was half a cent per mile. This was 5 times better than his threshold. This wasn't just a good deal. This was free money wearing a thin chocolate pudding disguise. David looked at the shelf. Then he looked at his cart. Then he looked at the shelf again. And then he thought, I need to go to the bank. What happened next sounds like a montage from a heist movie. David didn't just buy the pudding at one grocery outlet. He systematically visited 10 different grocery outlet locations across the Sacramento area. He bought every single cup of Healthy Choice pudding they had in stock. Every single cup. Shelves emptied. Stockrooms cleared. Managers staring in bewilderment. The cashiers started recognizing him. They gave him a nickname, Pudding Guy. Some of them asked questions. David had his story ready. Y2K prep. He was stocking up for the Millennium Bug. Totally normal behavior for May 1999. The cashiers nodded. Sure. Makes sense. 12,000 cups of pudding for the end of the world. Why not? David even got managers to order additional cases for him. They were happy to help. Moving that much inventory? That's a good week. David would show up a few days later, and there'd be more pallets of pudding waiting for him. He bought it all. By the time he was done, David Phillips owned 12,150 individual pudding cups. They filled his garage, his kitchen, probably his living room. His wife, Cindy, must have been either the most understanding person on earth or deeply questioning her marriage. The pudding cost him $3,140. But now David had a problem. A very specific, very urgent problem. The promotion had a deadline. To get the double miles, the 1,000 miles per 10 barcodes, instead of 500, he needed to mail in his submissions with a postmark no later than May 31st. And May was almost over. Cutting 12,000 UPC codes off pudding cups is not quick work. David and Cindy started cutting. Their daughters helped. They developed blisters. They grew to hate the smell of chocolate pudding. And they realized, with growing panic, that they weren't going to make it. The family simply couldn't process 12,000 cups in time. David needed help. And this is where the story goes from clever to brilliant. David called the Salvation Army. Think about this move for a second. The Salvation Army is a charitable organization that helps feed the homeless and poor. David had 12,000 cups of pudding he didn't actually want to eat. He just needed the barcodes. The Salvation Army had volunteers, people who could help cut barcodes in exchange for, 12,000 cups of pudding that they could actually use to feed people. David made them an offer. You help me cut the UPC codes off these pudding cups, and you keep all the pudding. Every single cup. Free food for your programs. The Salvation Army said yes immediately. So now you have a scene that's almost too perfect. A Salvation Army facility in Sacramento. Tables covered with pudding cups. Volunteers sitting around with scissors, carefully cutting the cardboard sleeves to extract the UPC codes. Stacks and stacks of barcodes growing on one side. Stacks and stacks of pudding cups, freed from their promotional wrappers, going into boxes for food distribution on the other. David worked alongside them, everyone cutting. Thousands of snips, the deadline approaching. And they made it. Just barely. David packaged up 1,215 submissions, each containing 10 UPC codes. He got them postmarked on time, and then he waited. Here's the thing about what David did. It was absolutely, completely 100% legal. He bought products. He followed the promotion rules exactly. He submitted his proofs of purchase through the proper channels. There was nothing Healthy Choice could refuse without admitting their promotion was poorly designed. But would they honor it? The answer came a few weeks later. Healthy Choice sent David his miles. All of them. 1,253,000 frequent flyer miles. They could have fought him. They could have claimed he was abusing the system. They could have added a clause about maximum submissions. But they didn't. They honored the promotion. Because here's the beautiful irony. David Phillips buying 12,000 pudding cups and generating international news coverage was probably the best marketing Healthy Choice could have asked for. The cost to Conagra? Basically nothing. Airlines sell miles to partners at a tiny fraction of their supposed value, often less than a penny per mile. Conagra's total cost was probably under $15,000 for publicity that reached millions of people worldwide. David, meanwhile, had more miles than he knew what to do with. He allocated them across multiple frequent flyer programs. The bulk went to American Airlines AAdvantage, over 1 million miles, which automatically granted him lifetime gold status. Later, he'd earn enough additional miles to reach lifetime platinum. But the story doesn't end with David just sitting on a pile of miles. He used them. Over the next 7 years, David and his family traveled extensively. They went to Mauritius in British Airways first class. They flew to Peru with friends. They island hopped through the Caribbean. They explored Europe. His daughters grew up flying to foreign countries multiple times a year, all funded by chocolate pudding. David kept a running tally. In that Johnny Jet interview, he mentioned he'd visited over 20 countries using frequent flyer miles. He was still earning miles 5 times faster than he was spending them. His freezer was full of steaks from another promotion. His pantry had multi-year supplies of breakfast bars and cereal. His mailbox overflowed with magazines, all byproducts of various mileage schemes. The pudding stunt wasn't an isolated incident. It was the most famous example of how David approached the world, as a series of optimization problems waiting to be solved. And then there's the tax deduction. Because David donated the pudding to the Salvation Army, a registered charity, he could claim a charitable deduction. He wrote off $815 on his taxes. So the net cost of his million miles? $2,325. For context, buying 1 million miles directly from an airline today would cost tens of thousands of dollars, if they'd even let you do it. The media loved this story. The Wall Street Journal covered it. So did Time magazine, the New York Times, People magazine, the London Times. David appeared on the Today Show, CNN, National Public Radio. Hundreds of local news stations did segments. Everyone wanted to talk to the pudding guy. David handled the attention with bemused grace. He wasn't trying to be famous. He just found a really good deal and had the audacity to fully exploit it. When reporters asked if he felt bad about gaming the system, he'd shrug. What system? He followed the rules exactly as written. If the rules allowed for this outcome, that was a problem with the rules, not with him. The story reached Hollywood. Paul Thomas Anderson, the acclaimed director behind films like Boogie Nights and Magnolia, came across the pudding guy's story and became fascinated. Not with the miles or the pudding specifically, but with the psychology of it. What kind of person sees the world this way? Who looks at a pudding cup and sees frequent flyer miles? Anderson wrote a screenplay loosely inspired by David's story. He cast Adam Sandler in a rare dramatic role. The result was Punch Drunk Love, released in 2002. In the film, Sandler's character discovers a promotion for frequent flyer miles on Healthy Choice products and exploits it obsessively, buying massive quantities of pudding. The film doesn't recreate David's story exactly. It uses the pudding scheme as a jumping-off point to explore loneliness, anxiety, and obsessive behavior. But the core premise, the beautiful absurdity of turning pudding into travel, that came straight from David Phillips. Anderson got permission from both David and Healthy Choice before making the film. David saw it and liked it. The film premiered at Cannes, where Anderson won Best Director. Critics praised it as one of Sandler's best performances, and every review mentioned the pudding scheme. David's story had become part of cinema history. But what's the legacy here? What did David Phillips actually accomplish beyond personal travel and a Hollywood cameo? He proved something important. He demonstrated that the systems corporations build to encourage consumer behavior often contain exploitable flaws. And more than that, he showed that exploiting those flaws, when done legally and cleverly, isn't just acceptable, it's admirable. David became a folk hero in the travel hacking community. Flyer Talk basically canonized him. His story inspired thousands of people to start reading the fine print, to start thinking creatively about promotions and rewards programs. In the years after David's pudding scheme became public, companies got smarter. Promotions started including clauses limiting the number of submissions. Terms and conditions grew longer. Legal departments got involved earlier in the process. But the loopholes never fully closed. They just got harder to find. In the mid-2000s, there was the United States Mint promotion, where you could buy dollar coins online with a credit card, earning credit card rewards, and then deposit the dollar coins back into your bank account at face value. Free miles and points for essentially no cost. People ordered hundreds of thousands of dollars in dollar coins. The Mint eventually shut it down. The fundamental dynamic remains. Corporations create promotions to drive behavior. Some people will engage with those promotions as intended, and a small subset of people, the David Phillips of the world, will analyze those promotions as systems to be optimized. The travel hacking community is now enormous, with blogs, podcasts, and conferences. People earn millions of miles and points annually without spending much money. They fly first class to Tokyo for the price of a couple of credit card annual fees. They stay in luxury hotels essentially for free. Airlines and banks know this is happening. They've made programs more complex in response, but they also benefit from it. The publicity these stories generate drives enrollment, and the people who game the system most aggressively often become the most loyal customers, spending money strategically to maximize returns. David Phillips today is the Associate Vice President of Energy and Sustainability for the entire University of California system. He oversees capital programs, energy initiatives, and sustainability efforts across 10 campuses, 5 medical centers, and 3 national laboratories. He manages a team of 50 people. He works on decarbonizing campus energy systems and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Serious work, important work, but he'll always be the pudding guy. That nickname stuck. When he gives presentations, someone inevitably asks about the pudding. And David tells the story again, still amused by the whole thing after more than 2 decades. What makes David's story endure isn't just the cleverness or the audacity, it's that everyone involved actually came out ahead. David got his miles. The Salvation Army got 12,000 cups of pudding to distribute to people who needed food. Healthy Choice got millions of dollars in free publicity. American Airlines got a loyal customer who'd achieve lifetime elite status and probably encourage others to fly with them. Nobody was victimized. Nobody lost. It was a genuinely positive sum outcome achieved through nothing more than careful reading and creative thinking. There's something almost wholesome about it. In an era where we're constantly warned about scams and fraud, where every deal feels like it has a hidden catch, David Phillips found a promotion that was exactly what it appeared to be. He just understood what it was better than the people who created it. The lesson here isn't that you should go buy 12,000 cups of pudding. The specific opportunity is gone. The lesson is broader than that. The world is full of systems designed by people who didn't consider every possible way those systems could be used. Sometimes the rules, as written, allow for outcomes the rule makers never imagined. And if you're willing to do the math, read the fine print, and put in the work, you might just find your own pudding. David Phillips proved that the gap between what corporations intend and what they actually incentivize can be enormous. He proved that being clever, being thorough, and being willing to look ridiculous while pushing a shopping cart full of pudding through a grocery store can pay off in ways that seem almost magical. He turned $3,000 and a lot of scissors work into experiences worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. He gave 12,000 pudding cups to charity. He inspired a film. He became a legend, and he never broke a single rule. That's the part that makes it beautiful. In a world that often rewards those who bend or break the rules, David Phillips won by following them more carefully than anyone else bothered to. The pudding guy didn't hack the system. He just read the manual.